The spotlight turns on, the audience applauds, and Johnny Carson walks out like everything is under control. For decades, The Tonight Show looked smooth, polished, and perfectly timed. But backstage, it was a completely different story. Some of the biggest celebrities didn't always arrive sober. From strange behavior to unpredictable moments, Carson often had to think fast and keep the show together, without the audience ever realizing what was really going on. Number 1. Oliver Reed. When things went too far, Oliver Reed was never known for being calm or predictable. Even before stepping onto The Tonight Show, he had built a reputation for being intense, outspoken, and completely unfiltered. But one particular appearance pushed things beyond entertainment, and into something much more uncomfortable. The moment he walked onto the stage, something felt off. His movements were loose, his speech slightly slurred, and his energy unusually aggressive. At first, it seemed like he might have just had a few drinks, nothing too alarming for that era. But within minutes, it became clear this was more than that. Instead of calmly answering questions, Reed began interrupting. His responses were scattered, often drifting away from what was being asked. His voice grew louder, his tone more unpredictable. The audience didn't quite know how to react. Some laughed nervously. Others just watched in silence. Then things escalated. Out of nowhere, Reed stood up and started demonstrating physical movements, almost like he was preparing for a fight. It was sudden, awkward, and completely out of place. Backstage, the tension rose immediately. Crew members shifted closer. Security became alert. What started as an unusual interview was quickly turning into a situation that could go wrong at any moment, but Johnny Carson remained composed. Number 2. Richard Pryor, genius on the edge. Richard Pryor was one of the most brilliant comedians to ever step onto The Tonight Show stage. Raw, fearless, and completely original, he had a way of turning real-life pain into comedy that felt both hilarious and deeply honest. But there was another side to him, a side that made his appearances unpredictable. On one particular night, Pryor walked out looking normal. Calm. Focused. Ready to deliver, and at first, everything went exactly as expected. He was sharp. Funny. Effortless. The audience loved him, but then something shifted. Mid-conversation, his rhythm started to break. His thoughts became less connected. A simple story slowly drifted into unrelated ideas. As if his mind was moving faster than his words could keep up, his eyes changed. His focus faded in and out. The audience wasn't sure anymore. Was this part of the act? Or something else? Backstage, the answer was obvious. Pryor's well-known struggles with substances were no secret, and moments like this showed how quickly things could turn. But Johnny Carson didn't expose it, he handled it. Instead of letting the moment collapse, Carson stepped in, smoothly, almost invisibly. He redirected the conversation with quick questions. He added light jokes to ease the tension. He created a rhythm Pryor could follow again. It wasn't obvious to the viewers, but it was happening in real time. Control. Without confrontation, for a moment, Pryor found his balance again. The brilliance came back, the laughter returned, but the unpredictability never fully disappeared. Carson understood exactly what he was dealing with. He respected Pryor's genius, but he also knew how fragile that moment could be, so he stayed ready, guiding when needed, backing off when things worked, protecting the flow of the show at all costs. Because with Richard Pryor, you weren't just hosting an interview, you were managing a live wire. Number 3. Peter Fonda. When reality slipped away, Peter Fonda arrived on The Tonight Show as one of the defining faces of the counterculture era, cool, confident, and completely unpredictable. But on this particular night, something felt different from the very start. As he sat down, his attention seemed scattered. He would begin answering a question, then suddenly pause, as if he had lost track of where he was. His eyes drifted toward the lights, the audience, even his own hands, before snapping back to the conversation seconds later. At first, it was subtle, then it became impossible to ignore. a simple question about his latest project turned into something else entirely. Instead of promoting his work, Fonda drifted into a strange, abstract explanation about time, reality, and how everything connects in ways people don't understand. The audience didn't know how to react. Some laughed lightly. Others just watched, confused. Backstage, however, the situation was clear. This wasn't just a quirky interview, it was slipping out of control. Johnny Carson recognized it instantly. He didn't challenge Fonda. He didn't try to correct him. Instead, he adjusted. His questions became shorter, simpler. He kept his tone calm, neutral, giving Fonda space while quietly searching for a way to regain structure. But it wasn't working. Fonda continued drifting further. His thoughts becoming more disconnected, harder to follow. The conversation was no longer grounded. That's when Carson made the call. Without creating any visible tension, he signaled to wrap things up early. Within minutes, the segment ended. Clean transition. No explanation. To the viewers at home, it felt quick, but not dramatic. Behind the scenes, it was a necessary move. Because sometimes, no matter how skilled the host is, there's a point where the conversation simply can't be guided back, and Carson knew exactly when that point had been reached. It wasn't about embarrassment. Number 4. Sammy Davis Jr. Energy beyond control. Sammy Davis Jr. was the definition of a complete performer, singer, dancer, comedian, all in one. He had been on The Tonight Show many times before, always delivering smooth, confident, and highly entertaining appearances. But one particular night stood out, not because he failed, but because he was operating at a completely different level. From the moment he sat down, his energy was intense. He spoke rapidly, jumping from one story to another, without finishing the last. His hands moved constantly, his body couldn't stay still, and his thoughts seemed to race ahead of his words. To most viewers, it just looked like Sammy being extra excited. But behind the scenes, many believed there was more to it. His behavior had all the signs of someone running on something stronger than just adrenaline. Still, unlike other guests who lost control, Sammy never did. That was the difference. Despite the speed, the scattered thoughts, and the restless energy, he remained sharp. He was still funny, still engaging, still completely in command of the audience. Johnny Carson recognized this immediately. Instead of slowing him down, Carson adjusted to his pace. He allowed Sammy to talk freely, stepping in only when necessary to guide the conversation back on track. He didn't interrupt too much, didn't challenge the rhythm, he simply worked around it. And somehow, it worked. The segment stayed entertaining from start to finish. There were no awkward silences, no uncomfortable moments, just a performance that felt supercharged. Behind the desk, Carson stayed calm as always, but even he couldn't ignore the intensity. At one point, as they went to break, he reportedly joked about feeling exhausted just sitting next to him, because what the audience saw as excitement was something much more powerful behind the scenes. Number 5. Cheech Chong. In on the joke. Cheech Marin and Tommy Chong weren't just comedians, they were the face of an entire counterculture. Their humor revolved around one thing, and they never tried to hide it. So when they appeared on The Tonight Show, everyone already knew what to expect, and that was exactly what made it work. From the moment they sat down, their energy was relaxed, almost too relaxed. Their timing felt loose, their stories wandered, and their reactions came a second slower than usual. It was obvious. But unlike other guests, this wasn't a problem, this was the act. They weren't trying to appear polished or controlled. Their entire persona was built around being laid back, slightly out of sync, and completely unconcerned with structure, and Johnny Carson understood that perfectly. Instead of correcting them or trying to tighten the conversation, he did the opposite. He leaned into it. Carson played the straight character, acting slightly confused, asking simple questions, and pretending not to fully understand their references. This gave Cheech and Chong the perfect setup to do what they did best. Their answers became longer, more scattered, and funnier with every moment. Sometimes, a story would go nowhere, sometimes, it would take an unexpected turn, but that unpredictability was exactly what made the audience laugh, and Carson knew it. Rather than controlling the interview, He allowed it to unfold naturally, stepping in only to keep things from drifting too far off course. It wasn't chaos, it was controlled freedom. The audience was in on the joke, Carson was in on the joke, and Cheech and Chong were exactly who people expected them to be. That's what made their appearances so memorable, because on that stage, authenticity mattered more than perfection, and sometimes, the best way to handle an unpredictable guest is to stop trying to control them at all. Number 6. Truman Capote. When it fell apart, Truman Capote was known for his sharp wit, elegant speech, and captivating storytelling. He had been on The Tonight Show before, and always delivered, but one night changed everything. The moment he walked onto the stage, it was clear something was wrong. His steps were unsteady, his posture loose, and when he began to speak, his words came out slow, slurred, almost impossible to follow. This wasn't subtle, it was obvious. Carson greeted him as usual, trying to keep things smooth. But as the conversation started, it quickly became difficult to continue. Capote struggled to form complete sentences. He would begin a thought, then lose it halfway. His head dipped forward at times, as if he might fall asleep, before suddenly snapping back up. The audience didn't laugh this time, they watched in silence. Behind the scenes, tension built instantly. This wasn't an unusual or quirky moment, it was a breakdown. Johnny Carson immediately shifted his approach. His questions became very short, very simple. He gave Capote more time to respond, hoping to stabilize the conversation, but nothing worked. There was no rhythm, no connection, no recovery. For one of the first times, Carson couldn't guide the moment back, and that's what made it different from every other guest, because this wasn't someone being loose or relaxed. This was someone completely out of it. The segment dragged, feeling longer than it actually was. Carson kept his composure, maintaining professionalism on camera, but the discomfort was impossible to hide. As soon as they went to break, the decision was made, this wouldn't happen again. Unlike others who returned after unusual appearances, Capote had crossed a line that couldn't be overlooked. It wasn't about humor. It wasn't about unpredictability, it was about respect, for the show, the audience, and the moment. And from that night on, Truman Capote never sat in that chair again. Number 7. George Carlin, the functional rebel. George Carlin wasn't just a comedian, he was a thinker, a rebel, and one of the sharpest minds to ever appear on The Tonight Show. By the 1970s, his image had completely transformed. The clean-cut performer was gone. In his place was a more relaxed, counterculture version, long hair, sharper opinions, and a noticeably different energy. And yes, he often walked onto that stage not entirely sober. But here's what made Carlin different from everyone else: it never slowed him down. In fact, it seemed to do the opposite. When he spoke, his thoughts flowed effortlessly, one idea connecting to the next in a way that felt spontaneous, yet incredibly sharp. He could take a simple topic and turn it into a deep, hilarious, and thought-provoking monologue within seconds. There were no awkward pauses, no loss of control, no confusion, just pure, uninterrupted brilliance. Johnny Carson understood this immediately. Unlike other guests who needed guidance or correction, Carlin didn't need to be managed, he needed space, so that's exactly what Carson gave him. Instead of interrupting or steering the conversation, Carson would simply introduce a topic, and then lean back, letting Carlin take over. And when he did, the result was unforgettable: long, flowing riffs filled with humor, insight, and unexpected turns that kept both the audience and Carson fully engaged. There was an unspoken understanding between them. Carson knew Carlin's state, Carlin knew Carson trusted him, and that trust made all the difference, because while other guests struggled to stay in control, George Carlin thrived in it. He wasn't chaotic, he wasn't unstable, he was precise, even in a relaxed state, and that's what set him apart, because sometimes, being slightly off doesn't take away from brilliance, it reveals it.